Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to another episode and a new week of Market Update, where we discuss leading financial and economic developments in Europe, Asia, and North America. My name is Tony. We have a big episode today, so let's jump in. And first up, we need to start in North America. A federal appeals court has delivered a major setback to US President Donald Trump's global tariff regime, ruling that his administration acted illegally when it imposed sweeping levies through an emergency law. Yet in a twist that prolongs the uncertainty, the judges allowed the tariffs to remain in effect as the legal battle continues. In a 7-4 decision on Friday, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit upheld a lower court finding that Trump overstepped his authority when invoking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, IEEPA, to slap tariffs on dozens of countries. The court concluded that the statute, which grants broad presidential powers during emergencies, does not explicitly authorize the imposition of tariffs. The appeals court, nevertheless, instructed the Court of International Trade to reconsider its earlier move to block the tariffs nationwide. That could limit the scope of any injunction to the plaintiffs in the case, Democratic-led states and small businesses, rather than halting the tariffs for all importers. Trump responded defiantly on social media, declaring that, in all caps, quote, "all tariffs are still in effect," end quote, and dismissing the decision as the work of a, quote, highly partisan appeals court, end quote. He warned that rolling back the levies, quote, would be a total disaster for the country, end quote, portraying the tariffs as essential to defending American jobs and negotiating leverage. The ruling throws trillions of dollars of global trade into limbo. Should the tariffs ultimately be struck down, the administration could face demands for massive refunds on duties already collected, undermining Trump's heavily promoted trade deals with countries from China to Mexico. At the heart of the dispute is whether IEEPA, which has historically been used to impose financial sanctions and freeze assets, can serve as the basis for tariffs. Both the trade court and the appeals panel concluded that it cannot. Quote, notably, when drafting IEEPA, Congress did not use the term tariff or any of its synonyms, like duty or tax, end quote, the court noted. Trade lawyers say Congress had passed separate statutes, such as Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, that explicitly delegate tariff authority to the president. The decision also leaned on the Supreme Court's recent embrace of the so-called major questions doctrine, which requires clear congressional authorization before presidents or agencies can enact sweeping economic policies. Tariffs, the appeals judges said, qualify as a decision of, quote, vast economic and political significance, end quote, that cannot rest on vague statutory language. The tariffs in question include Trump's, what he called Liberation Day, 10% baseline levies on global imports, as well as extra duties on Mexico, China, and Canada linked to the fentanyl crisis. Also at issue are what he called reciprocal tariffs imposed on nations that failed to reach trade deals with Washington by early August. Trading partners are watching closely. Wendy Cutler, a former U.S. trade negotiator, now with the Asia Society Policy Institute, wrote that allies and rivals alike, quote, must be dazed and confused, end quote. Countries that accepted deals under tariff pressure may now reconsider their commitments, she suggested. India, which was hit with 50% duties recently, quote, must be rejoicing, end quote, while European and Asian partners may delay ratifying agreements until U.S. legal clarity emerges. The administration could appeal directly to the Supreme Court, which has sided with Trump on several other contentious issues. Alternatively, officials might allow the trade court to narrow its injunction before pressing forward. In the meantime, officials have readied fallback options under other legal authorities, though none offer the spread or scope of IEEPA. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and other top officials warned in filings that invalidating the tariffs outright would cause, quote, dangerous diplomatic embarrassment, end quote, and harm ongoing negotiations. For now, Trump's tariffs remain intact, but their long-term survival is increasingly in question. A question with trillions on the line. Next up, crowds in Indonesia, Southeast Asia's largest economy, have looted the home of the country's finance minister as unrest sweeps across the country in one of the most serious political crises of President Prabowo Subianto's tenure. In the early hours of Sunday, demonstrators stormed the finance minister's residence on the outskirts of Jakarta, seizing furniture, paintings and other belongings. The raid followed similar attacks a day earlier on the homes of 3 parliamentarians as fury mounted over lawmakers' newly approved benefits. The immediate trigger for the protests was Parliament's decision to award members an additional $3,000 monthly housing allowance, an amount nearly 10 times Jakarta's minimum wage. For many Indonesians struggling with rising living costs, this move symbolized elite indifference to their hardships. Underlying the outrage is a deeper sense of economic malaise. Manufacturing layoffs, stagnant wages and climbing consumer prices have eroded middle-class purchasing power. The protests turned explosive on Thursday after a motorbike taxi driver was killed when a police vehicle ploughed into a rally in Jakarta. The death galvanized public anger and expanded the demonstration to other cities. In Makassar, 3 people died after a fire broke out in a regional parliament building set ablaze during clashes. The president has adopted a tough line, describing elements of the unrest as bordering on, quote, treason and terrorism, end quote. At a Sunday press conference, he instructed police and the military to take the, quote, strongest possible action, end quote, against looters and vandals. At the same time, the government has sought to defuse tensions by cutting back on parliamentary perks. The president announced lawmakers would forego foreign travel and extra allowances. He also cancelled a planned trip to a security summit in China. While Indonesia's finance minister has been in the role since 2016, and as a former World Bank managing director has long been respected in international circles. Domestically, however, she has faced criticism for endorsing the administration's efficiency program, which reduced transfers to regional governments and tightened spending in areas already sensitive to voters. Her home being looted demonstrates how the unrest is now targeting even the country's most prominent technocrats. The political turbulence has unnerved investors. On Friday, the Jakarta Composite Index tumbled 1.5%, the steepest drop among major global benchmarks. The currency slid 0.8% against the dollar as traders braced for further volatility. Analysts warn that continued unrest could force capital flight and dampen the appeal of Indonesia's markets, which had reached record highs earlier this year. The president has positioned himself as a populist leader, with programs such as free school meals and the creation of a sovereign wealth fund managing nearly 900 state firms. Yet the protests show these initiatives have not quelled frustrations over inequality, corruption, and elite privilege. For now, Indonesia's political instability and its reputation as one of Southeast Asia's most promising economies hangs in the balance. If you want to be on top of the most up-to-date analysis on the biggest developments in the world's most important markets, through grounded and sober analysis, no fluff and no partisan commentary, consider subscribing to Market Update. Hit the bell notification icon and you will be. And if you're getting some value from today's episode, don't forget to hit the like button. And finally for today we move to Europe, and we have some good news for the UK, which is nice. There's been a lot of disappointing news in the UK recently, so it's good to touch on something more positive. The UK defence sector has won its largest ever Warship export contract, securing a £10 billion deal with Norway for the supply of at least 5 Type 26 frigates. The agreement, announced on yesterday, marks a deepening of Anglo-Norwegian defence ties as both nations strengthen their capabilities against mounting Russian activity in the Arctic and North Atlantic. The frigates, to be built primarily at BAE Systems Glasgow shipyard, will begin delivery from 2030. The Ministry of Defence said the contract would support around 4,000 jobs in the UK, more than half in Scotland, and sustained work across 432 companies in the defence supply chain. BAE's order book is now filled for years ahead, providing long-term stability for the shipbuilding sector. Norway's Prime Minister Jonas Støre, please forgive my pronunciation, that is likely incorrect, that pronunciation, described the deal as a strategic partnership that would, quote, strengthen our and NATO's ability to patrol and protect the maritime areas in the High North, end quote. The UK beat out rivals from the US, France and Germany to secure the contract, showing confidence in British industry. A key feature of the agreement is the creation of a so-called combined fleet of 13 British and Norwegian anti-submarine warfare frigates. The vessels will work together to detect, track and neutralise Russian submarines in an area of growing concern for NATO. The announcement comes as UK, Norwegian and US forces, including Poseidon submarine hunting aircraft, conducted an operation operation in the North Atlantic last week, reportedly tracking at least one Russian submarine. Officials stressed that this was an operational mission rather than an exercise, showing the heightened security environment. The UK and Norway already cooperate on safeguarding vital North Sea infrastructure, including pipelines, interconnectors and data cables, which are increasingly vulnerable to hybrid attacks since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The new contract cements this partnership and will be followed by a broader defence agreement between London and Oslo. The UK's governing party, Labour, has pledged to increase defence spending to 3.5% of GDP by 2035, up from 2.3% this year. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer hailed the frigate deal as a milestone in interoperability with Norway. While questions remain over whether the order could delay delivery of the Royal Navy's own 8 Type 26 frigates, the Ministry of Defence insists all ships will be in service by the end of the 2030s. Okay, that is today's episode of Market Update. Thank you so much everybody for watching. Have a good Monday, have a productive week, and I will hopefully see you for a new episode tomorrow.